Every country or continent on earth has its fair share of nefarious characters that prey on vulnerable people. Africa certainly is no exception. We have our fair share of con artists who are very skilled at taking advantage of people who are new. So, in this video, I will show you some of the most common schemes or ways that con artists take advantage of people returning from diaspora. So feel free to share any examples if I miss any down in the comment section. But before we unpack this important topic, I want you to walk with me on Rateng Boulevard, right in front of you. We will start by walking through Kodongo Street, then we will go down to Punja Avenue, and then we'll circle back to Rateng Boulevard. So welcome back to the village, folks. We are in Karateng, an amazing village in Kisumu in Western Kenya. We talk about everything that involves returning to the village. And we're on the road to 10K subscribers. So thank you, folks, for keeping it going. If you have not subscribed, can you check? Because a lot of my viewers, 70% of my viewers watch regularly but do not subscribe. So check if you've not subscribed and do so. So anyway, thank you again for coming back. We still appreciate you coming, even if you don't subscribe now. So let's get started. One of the most common complaints I hear from returning diasporans is often about con artists within families. And typically you hear cases of folks in diaspora sending money for investment and nothing gets done. I have a very good friend of mine who would tell me that every time he sent money home, his father would add an additional wife. So by the time he got home, his father had like maybe 3 or 4 additional wives, and the home he was supposed to have built was non-existent. This is a very, very common. In fact, in the majority of cases, the trusted family members are the ones who are going to harm you. I've only met 4 diaspora folks who use family to get things done. The rest of the folks, it's always dust everywhere. So yes, sending money for investment through family is usually not a great idea. And then, of course, let's say you're building something. You ask for how much things cost. They will either overquote or they will give you the right price. But when they go to the shop, they negotiate down the price. So it's almost like they're selling you something they bought from the store. And then issues of land. I encourage you to go watch my video on land. Lots of problems around people who move to diaspora. When they come back, their share of the ancestral land is gone. Or sometimes when the folks come back from diaspora, they are welcome back, they're allowed to build. As soon as they're done building, then they're told, hey, now you need to move. Issues of boundary, people changing boundaries for land that they don't own. You can see this in my video where I talk about lots of issues on land. But yes, with family, there's lots of issues where you put trust in the people that care about you until you find out that they care more about your pocket than yourself. And then, of course, we have romance scams. Extremely common. Typically, when people think of romance scams, we think of West Africa. But it turns out every corner of Africa has its version of it. Starting with the case where somebody uses a fake profile and sort of like catfishes you, to the more common cases where, especially in Kenya, I see young single men who are super smooth talking, dress very well, know how to get their way around women. And oftentimes, the one common thing about all these men is that they're really good at spotting vulnerabilities. And they typically go for people who, in their minds, appear lonely, maybe single parents, maybe busy, or middle-aged women in diaspora. And these young men know how to really compartmentalize lives. So they have these scams running around, but they also have legitimate relationships with other people at the same time. And they're often able to manage this multiple relationship without any issues until things begin falling apart, if caught. But these are very, very common. And typically with these arrangements, all they need is to extract as much financial gain as they can from these young women in exchange for emotional and sexual gratification for the women. Unfortunately, the women often don't realize what they're caught up in until it's already too late. Then there's this group of married men who actually make arrangements with their wives. And the wives know that their husband are out there trying to get diaspora women. And so when the diaspora woman comes to Kenya to visit, these diaspora women are often told that the the quote unquote woman in the house is a maid, when that woman is actually the wife of the boyfriend. So it's some convoluted experience where a man and a wife agree to scam a diaspora woman, and they typically present the man presents his wife as the maid. And then, of course, you have this group of young girls who are very good at flirting with single men. Oftentimes, you'll see them on Facebook or online platform where you notice that they've befriended many of your friends. And the first red flag is that the friends that you share in common are almost always men. So once they befriend your friends, then they befriend you, they start flirting. Next thing you know, the conversation ends up around money. And I'll tell you how to get around that. In fact, recently I almost got catfished by a similar one, but they're usually very obvious to see. But they still take advantage of many men out there. Then there's this specific case where diaspora women actually have a mutual agreement with a local guy where it's money in exchange for the sexual needs. Unfortunately, in some of those cases, blackmail comes in where pictures are taken, photos are taken, and then the young man starts blackmailing the woman. There's lots of women who have gone through hell with those kinds of things. Because in Kenya, there's very little you can do unless you are connected. Then the financial investment scams, like pyramid schemes, where they get you to invest and then they ask you to bring the next person and then the next person. Next thing you know, you've lost so much money. SACCOs, I don't know what SACCOs are in English. I don't know whether they are like saving schemes. Usually they are a big mistake for diaspora folks. There are some that work, but in many cases, all kinds of tears will be flowing after you open up your wallet. Then I've had cases where they ask you to buy like share certificates, which of course they'll give you very fancy papers that mean absolutely nothing. Then of course the land scams, lots of it. So I want you to go watch my video on land. The most common ones that I hear is cases where you buy land as a group of folks. There are cases that work successfully, but a lot of them, you buy that land and then you still have issues. Like there's a land that my wife and I bought nearly almost 8 to 10 years ago as a group. Till today, we have no paperwork and there's still back and forth and who is doing what. So those group land purchases can be really a big headache later on. Or they have you buy non-existent land or land that has been sold multiple times. The more common one, you might actually buy legitimate land. Next thing you know, you have squatters living on your land. And I believe there's a law in Kenya that if they squat on your land for a certain period of time, then they can actually legally claim it. Really bizarre. But I think there's something to that effect. So land issues are very common. So I encourage you to watch my previous video on land so you get more details. Another common scam opportunities are NGOs and charity, where they are running orphanages, they have community projects, particularly through church, or there's some kind of a collection going on around a funeral. In fact, I was recently scammed by a member of our Masena alumni group here who reached out to me that his mother died and all that. I mean, his story sounded legit. And as soon as I sent him money, I asked him to tell me where his home was because I was actually at home. I wanted to actually go see him. And then when I asked that, he simply disappeared. So lots of scams with charity. I'll tell you how to get around that when you want to involve yourself in charity. Then, of course, the most common one too is construction. And in everything from overquoting to incorrect quantities, missing stuff, labor, cheap stuff, construction has a lot. And I've got multiple videos on that and how to address some of those problems. Then, of course, number 7, we're talking about religious scams, where it's a matter of exchanging prayers for money. So they tell you, hey, I'll pray for you, but you need to bring this much money. Essentially, it's like you need to buy your way into heaven. Or the church can actually ask you to invest in some kind of property. In fact, the land scam that we're dealing with right now happened through the church. It was the church leadership, I think in some kind of a PEFR church in Nairobi, that got us to buy some kind of land that has, I mean, they've really looted that group. But for the most part in church, I hear cases where they're basically selling you hope. So they tell you, give me your earthly wealth so that you can just focus on your heavenly wealth. So whatever you made, just bring it all to religious leaders, and then you can just focus on your heavenly wealth. And typically, they really take advantage of people who are vulnerable, either going through some really tough life circumstances, or people who are already brainwashed. I've seen cases where leaders actually ask people to buy them. Even here in America, they do that. You see a pastor telling the congregants to buy them a brand new plane. In Kenya, it's mostly buying private cars for pastors and things like that. And then there's also cases where these religious leaders actually sleep with people's wives and children and all that. It happens. We don't talk about it, but it does happen. Then Kenya Power is another big area of complaint with tokens and all that. I've talked about Kenya Power before. And then, of course, there are issues around culture where people just socialize to accept abuse without resisting. You're simply told, oh, this is your elder, or this is a senior person, so you just need to take it. It's a very common thing. So here's some of the things you can do to minimize this risk. Number one, generally, I tell people, give what you receive. I don't give more than I receive, depending on circumstances. So I'm not investing too much in a place where people don't invest in me. With romance scams, I say, if you can, do the best to hold off on the money part. If you can date a person for a year or two without giving your money and they're still sticking around, most part you will have weeded out the nefarious characters. Because many of these people will not last 1 year if you're not giving them money. So accept the risk, but if you can, hold off on giving money for a period, at least a year or two, then most likely you'll be fine. With financial investment, I always say group investments are tricky. Personally, I stay away from them. I know they've worked in some cases, but this is one of the important areas where people lose money. So be careful doing group investment. With land scams, again, watch my video on land. You'll see ways to avoid that. With NGOs and charity, I tell people, you probably want to invest when you're at home. I minimize my charity involvement when I'm away from home. But if there's charity work to be done when I'm home, I absolutely get in because I can make an assessment of what's actually going on. Now, with the religious scam, I always tell people, a title of a person should not allow you to trust them just blindly like that. For me, I don't care how big of a title you are in a church. I never give that much trust to humans. And also, I tell people, please use what gave you. God gave you an ability to think for yourself. Don't ever give that up. Well, I hope this was informative. And so, like I said, we are ending it at Rateng Boulevard. I will see you in the next. Thank you.